Tim, how you doing, man?
Keith, how are you? Good to see you.
I'm so happy to see you. You know, you're a guest host today, sitting in for Rick. I am honored to be here with you.
I appreciate you having me back on the show once again. Glad to be here.
Well, your show was so great. You know, I've listened to it 4 or 5 times since we recorded it, and I'm still walking away with some takeaways. Thank you.
That's awesome. I'm glad you liked it. I enjoyed it as well.
You know, one of the things that really stuck out to me was when you mentioned something that you choose to do, no matter how life shows up. And what you said was you got to choose it. And so I thought that would be a great topic for today's show. So
Sure.
When you said that, what do you mean by choose it?
Well, essentially when something comes up in life, you have to choose whatever it is that's happening. And a lot of times what I struggle with, I know that you may want the outcome to be different, and there's things you might be able to do to make it different, but at some point in time, you have to choose what is happening. Otherwise, the alternative is to fight it, resist it, and have more pain.
You know, one of the things that I learned that's along those lines is that acceptance is tough. Resistance is even tougher. Is that true?
I remember I heard that before. I think you're the one that told me that. That is true, and it's hard to believe because when something's painful, you resist it at all costs. You resist that pain with the fear of what's on the other side of that, and it's very difficult to let go of that. It is, you know. But when you do, the acceptance of it is less painful than the resistance.
Yeah, you know, with all our podcasts, it's one thing to talk about it in the abstract, you know, in a vacuum. But it's another thing to talk about it when you open yourself up and be vulnerable about it. So I'm going to ask you to do that here.
Okay.
So what's some examples in the past in which, you know, you didn't choose it? And what came along with not choosing it and resisting? What's an example you can think of?
Well, I could think of a couple things that tie back to one of the things I mentioned in the podcast was getting divorced. And going through a divorce situation at that time was something that I didn't want to go through.
Right.
I didn't really want to choose it. I was resisting it. I was doing everything to resist what was actually happening. And then once I decided to choose it, then what it does is it opens up a lot of possibilities on the other side of that. And being able to choose it is really a strong, powerful, it's not easy to do, but when you do that, a lot of things open up.
So like, what were you resisting and what were you feeling, you know, as you were going through that period?
Well, there's so many things, and for anybody that goes through divorce, they know a lot of the challenges or the pains that can come with it. One of them being, for example, the fact that I would go from seeing my kids all of the time to seeing them half of the time. And some people even see their kids less than that, and luckily for me, it was half the time. And I didn't want that.
You know what? Look how you said that. Luckily for me, I saw him half the time.
That's true.
And other people was like, that's all I get. And you like, luckily, I got to see him half the time.
Yeah, no, you're right. But that was something, as one example, where I really resisted that because I did not want to not see my kids all the time. And I built up a relationship with their mom where I see them more than half the time. I'm able to visit with them, they're not being held for me.
Right, exactly.
Great relationship. But once I chose that, okay, my new life is with my kids half the time, what's good about that? And the good is that the half the time I have them, I'm with them fully and present. It's
Right.
me and them together, and that's something that I wouldn't necessarily have if there was a partner there that was sharing the time and so forth. So we have a lot more quality
Right.
time together. And then when I don't have them, I've got time to work on my activities and hobbies and things like that.
So when you were in that space to where you weren't choosing the situation as it was, and you're resisting it, what were some of the stories and conversations you had going on that were feeding that suffering, that pain that you were experiencing?
Well, it goes back to all the things that you choose to focus on. And when I was, and they're all very real. What I was choosing to focus on when I was struggling with it was how horrible it would be to be without the kids and all the things I was missing out on. And I was putting my energy towards that versus what are the things I get to experience, what are the unique experiences we get to have together,
Right.
and what can we build from there. And there's a lot of positive that came from that.
You know, when you were, I want to, keep going back to this past experience. Were you even aware that you were choosing it, or were you just kind of like along for the ride and not even conscious that you were choosing to dwell on what was missing, what wasn't ideal, what wasn't exactly as you would have preferred it. So when you were in that space, were you even conscious that you were making a choice?
Not at first, but a little bit of both. I think that I found myself happier unknowingly when I was choosing something, and then I realized what the formula was focusing on that positive side of it, and that a lot of good came from that.
Right.
And I just realized then I just have to really just focus on those things that I can control.
Right.
And
So when you were with your kids, you weren't thinking about, for example, like, man, this is all the time I get, I should be having more, or I used to have my kids all the time. Your thoughts were more like, this is a time I have. I'm about to maximize this experience of my kids.
yeah, that's it. But those thoughts come into your mind. You start to think about, I'm missing out on this, or now it's it's this particular day they have to go back. I'm not going to see them. But when you accept your reality, and you cannot, I cannot have my kids with me 100% of the time. That
Right.
just is not happening. So I have to then reset it, and then we start realizing, with their mom, they've got a sporting event. It's not my day. I'm able to go still.
Right.
So I see them a lot more than that, and it ends up being a positive thing.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. What about you now? I got to ask you. You asked me to be vulnerable too. What about you?
Okay.
Situation where you didn't choose it.
Oh, well, thank you for the question and the opportunity to be vulnerable. I have quite a few that come to mind too, and one of the ones I'll touch on is a relationship situation. Years ago I went through a breakup, and I did not want the relationship to end, and it was I felt some pain, I felt a lot of discomfort, and I held on, and she was great. She told me that continuing the relationship was not good for her. She felt like we'd be better if we went in a different direction, and I resisted it. And as a result of that, I continued to try to convince her that, hey, let's make this work. Let's give it another try. And there was not anything that either one of us could point to that made us want to, like, there was no smoking gun. There was no defining act that said this relationship has to end. She just felt like we could be happier, or she could be happier, if we went into a different direction, and we just became friends. And in the past, that's not what I wanted. I wanted, hey, listen, let's be in a relationship, let's be full on. I wasn't mature enough to be like, hey, let's have a friendship too.
Yeah.
It was like, hey, all of me or none of me. And throwing down ultimatums like that, and just really not accepting the reality as it was. And there was a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of why, just kind of dwelling on it, blaming and all those other emotions that come along with it. And that was a difficult period for me,
Yeah.
And that relationship ended, and I suffered in it a lot longer than I should have. And I should have been more, I guess, spiritually mature to accept her choice and let it go, but I wasn't there. So that's an example of me not choosing it and suffering more than I should have.
Yeah, that's a great share. And let me ask you this: why do you think people resist? I mean, if you know that something may not be good or healthy, and you might know that it might be better on the other side, why is there the resistance there?
In my case, the resistance was because I was attached. I was attached to our relationship continuing to go forward. I had a great time, together with her. We traveled. We did a lot of stuff together, and so it was a great relationship. And looking back, I can see some areas to where the relationship could have been better. And I understand now why she made the choice, but it was the attachment. She was attractive. She was fit. So I was attracted to all of that. And not only was I attracted to it, I was attached to it. Mm-hmm. So when that relationship, was coming to an end, it was really hard for me to let it go. But once I did that, reluctantly, time heals everything, and it sure did here. So that's an example of the past. So give an example now to where you may be going through something or went through something recently, and you learned from that, and you chose it more immediately. And what happened from there?
Well, one thing I think of off the top of my head, and it's going on currently, but something that was along the lines of being divorced, was we talked about a situation being different, and one with me packing my lunch.
Yeah.
So obviously, anytime you go through a divorce, there's maybe you're not as financially well off as you were before, or your life situation changes to where it wasn't the way it was before.
Right.
And so instantly on that one, I'm like, well, I guess I can't go out to eat, 4 or 5 days a week for lunch and so forth.
Right.
Accepted that immediately, and then as I mentioned earlier, once you do that and you make that choice, then these possibilities start to open up to you. And what opened up to me was, what could I do? What if I start packing lunch? And then I start learning how to cook things better, start saving a ton of money by not going out to eat all the time and taking care of myself at the same time. And,
Right.
and I know we talk about that all the time, where it's a continual thing where I'm constantly choosing that, not like, oh, I can't go out to eat, or in fact, now I could go out to eat, but I don't want to.
Right, exactly.
So,
and the benefits are, like you said, you save money, you eat healthier because you can control what the ingredients are in the food that you're eating, and you have more time.
yeah, and the alternate is if I fought that and fought against it, it'd be a big battle where everybody would lose, and therefore because I chose that, I was able to come up with creative solutions that ended up being a better situation anyways, I guess depending how you look at it. So.
Absolutely. So I guess, like last time, you want me to give an example?
Absolutely. Yeah, if you're going to ask me, I have to ask you right back. So.
Okay. An example would be about 2 years ago, the ToBeRe business went through a transition. We had some members who've been with us for a while. They went into a different direction. And financially, that was, there was some uncertainty there.
Sure.
And in the past, the way that I would have chosen it, I probably would have, I would have probably went to despair. Like, what am I going to do? I guess this whole dream and mission that I dedicated myself to 8 years of helping people get to the next level, I may have to do something different, to make ends meet and to create income, to generate revenue. And I would have probably been with, like, how could people, after everything that we've done together, how could people walk away from this relationship, this friendship? I would have been stuck in all that. I didn't spend 1 second in that space, not 1 second. I immediately, like when people, informed me that they were going to go into a different direction, my response to every single person was, thank you for the contribution you made to getting ToBeRe to this point. Thank you for all the opportunities that you gave me to help you reach your goals. And thank you for helping me reach mine, helping me grow. And that was my attitude from the very beginning. I chose to be grateful for the time we had together. And the other thing that I did was I chose, like, okay, this is where I am. This situation is challenging, but man, I cannot wait to see what we create right here, because, when people create magic, it's not when the waters are calm.
Right.
It's when the sea is raging.
That's true.
Like, and I said, if we can come out of this, if we can create magic out of this, then, we can do anything. And so I chose the situation just as it was. And that meant door hangers, that meant tutoring, math, Spanish, physics, whatever it took to keep the lights on. And it meant developing a new skill, video editing, podcasting, look at opportunities. And some of the stuff we threw up on the wall, while the intentions were there to create something that was going to benefit people, those things didn't produce a result that we might have thought they would. But the whole time they produced a result, and I learned along the way.
Yeah.
So that's an example of me making a powerful choice to accept things just as they were, be grateful in the moment as they were happening, and to wish no one any ill will, to send out love as opposed to resentment or what could have been or blame or none of that. I didn't beat myself up. I certainly didn't beat anyone else up. And I just chose the situation as it was, and look at where we are now, baby.
Podcast, yeah.
Look at where we are now.
Absolutely. You chose to head in a different direction, and I think back to your point about being attached is a lot of times people get attached to, well, this is how my business is going to go. I'm going to do A, B, C, and D, and this.
Right.
And you're still going to get to the top of the mountain, but it may not go exactly the way you thought. And to your point, you start coming up with other creative outlets. That's why there's a podcast right now. So that wasn't there before. So you start thinking of different things, and it may go a different direction. It may go a better direction.
Right. Exactly. It could be a better outcome if you choose it. And had I resisted that and been completely just consumed about what was in the past, then I could have missed a lot of opportunities along the way. And one thing's for certain, I wouldn't have grown. and I've grown a lot over the last 2 years, and you know, the thing that I've grown most, my capacity to love unconditionally, like it's through the roof, man.
What other choice do you have?
What other choice?
Choices? There's no
you know
choice.
what? You know what? I can make other choices, but it would not get me where I want to go.
Yeah.
And that's it. And that's what you saw too, right? With your children, it's like you could have been, you know, bitter about the divorce, bitter about, you know, how it affected you economically. What would that have gotten you?
Nothing.
Nothing.
No positive outcome out of that
Right.
whatsoever. Yeah.
And you play a big game, don't you?
You know, I certainly try to. You know, I can't say it's perfect all the time, but I know when I'm not on my game, I'm not doing something like I need to do. You
Right.
know? So I'm either not choosing, I'm resisting something, I'm being attached to something, and then I find myself struggling. So usually if I find myself struggling, I'll step back and go, okay, what am I not doing that I was doing before to help me succeed?
Okay, so before we close this episode, how do you know, when something happens, like what's a takeaway that you can give our audience about, you know, how you get into the mode of choosing what's going on? And I think you were talking about it just then, to where when you feel a loss of power, or you feel down, or you know, how do you process through that to get back to, I can make a choice here?
Well, I think a lot of times life goes on autopilot, where you're going through different feelings and emotions automatically. And I think if you just stop and listen to yourself and go, how am I feeling right now? And if you're not feeling good, then pushing pause on your life and go, okay, what am I not processing correctly? What do I need to go back and revisit or think about? Because if you just go on autopilot, you might find yourself in a bad mood for long periods of time.
Right.
You know, you and I talk about that a lot, where, you know, it's okay to be upset about something. It's okay to be in a bad mood, but nip it quickly, get over it, and then move on.
Right.
You know,
Something that I thought just now when you were talking, as I was listening, you said in all of what you said about what you do in the process of choosing it and getting back on track, you did not blame any other person. You just kept saying, I did, you know, I'm off track. You know, I'm here. You didn't say, she made me feel this way, she did this, or none of that came up.
Well, this is hard because one thing we all like to do is push blame on other people, but you have to take ownership of yourself and go, okay, even in the worst situation where they're totally in the wrong in some way, or in your eyes they are, it's always good to look back and go, okay, what role did I have in this?
Right.
I mean, say nothing. Well, maybe there's some things that you could or couldn't have done differently, and it always is helpful to look back to say, what role did I play? Because everything always takes two people, and there's a role that each of us play in each other.
Right, and in every turn, you can always choose your attitude.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And even if something happens where maybe something that I did was not right, you can't beat yourself up either. You have to say, okay, you know, next time this is how I'm going to process, or I can go. You know, you can't go back and change things. So,
right. Yeah. So just choose it, right?
Just choose it. That's the thing.
Good. Tim, thank you for a great show,
Thanks
man.
for having me in here. Appreciate it. Hope to be on again.
Oh, absolutely.
Thanks.